So I'll start with the winner. How do you feel? And why do you think you won the award yesterday? I remember some years ago, if you talk a bit about the history, on how the situation was about trying to launch an MVNO in the GCC countries, you faced a lot of reluctance. It was almost a mission impossible. And today you can talk about your own figures and facts, I think, and eventually stimulate the audience what it takes to achieve that.
Thanks, Karim. Yeah, as you said, it's for Friendly Group. We started in the end of 2006, so that's a few years back by now. The vision at that point when we started the business, and which remains our vision today, is to create a pan-regional footprint using the MVNO business model. At that time, it was relatively early days for this model in the region. There weren't really anybody thinking of this or let alone being operational. So in the beginning, it was as you say, a bit of a selling effort, and a lot of meetings with regulators and operators and so on. We had then the good fortune that Oman, where Joachim also is active, opened for MVNOs, and later followed by Jordan. So I'd say that the situation today is far better from the perspective of this business model. I think there is a growing appreciation with both regulators and operators that there is a benefit to be had both for the markets and for the bottom lines of the operators to working with partners. And in a way, whether it is for in-house brands, whether it is for partner brands, whether it's for MVNOs, we see very clearly that the idea of a multi-brand, a multi-segment approach is really being bought into by almost all operators nowadays. So I think we've gone through some interesting phases where in the beginning, if you go, when I say the beginning, that's about maybe 5 years ago, there was still a strong feeling in the operator community that the one brand fits all structure was the right one. So one of the big well-known mobile brands would cover all segments from rich to poor to young to old, different interests, different usage patterns. We see clearly that has changed now to an appreciation and an active work from the operators that multiple brands and multiple segments is the way to go. And nowadays the discussions we are having with operators across the region is more about how do we structure it in a way that works for both rather than whether it should be done. So I think for us it's a very comforting, and we see it as a big step that we've kind of moved from the shall we do it at all to more how should we do it, and that's a very important and I think very promising development we've seen in these 5 years, and obviously that is the kind of situation we were all wishing for when starting the business as pioneers back at that point. Absolutely,
as a pioneer. There is also another pioneer in the panel, Aisa, talking to you now as head of international expansion for Turkcell. One operator of your region actually expanding in Europe and in one of the biggest markets, Germany. And you may think of Germany being quite competitive. Yes, indeed. Who believes that there are more than 10 MVNOs in Germany? Who believes that there are more than 50? Yes. Who believes that there are more than 100? Yes. Who believes that there are more than 150? It's 170 today. And eventually, by the end of the session, we'll have 171. So that tells you in what spirit we are right now, when in this region we're still thinking whether we should allow or not an MVNO, in mature countries, you can expect an infinite numbers, because in theory, the best and most cost-effective way to achieve a certain target is not necessarily with your own brand. It will be more expensive for you to achieve that particular brand than leveraging an existing brand and a community with very strong insights. Google, you heard, is preparing for an MVNO, and you may imagine how big the affinity of a certain group is. So I think for courage you had to go to Germany, fighting with 170 brands. Eventually you can share with us some of your perspective and why you did that, and if this is the beginning of a long story, or you would expand yourself in the region as well.
Thank you for the great encouragement. Yes, we might be considered as a pioneer in terms of being an MNO, going into the MVNO space. However, we're quite inexperienced in terms of our MVNO venture. We have just launched in April this year. And we, of course, planned about it very carefully. But to our excitement, it's going quite well against all the competition. It has already reached more than 150,000 subscribers.
150,000?
Since April. And as you said, one of the biggest, of course, elements that gave us the courage to do this is the Turkcell brand. As Turkcell, as most of you might know, we're the leading operator in Turkey, and with more than 54% market share. The Turkish community in Germany is, of course, our address market, and there are more than 3 million, maybe the official numbers might be a little less, but 3 million people of Turkish origin living in Germany. And
so 5% in a few months. Not too bad.
Not too bad, yeah. And there are already existing brands and MVNOs targeting the Turkish community. It's not a, very lowly penetrated community either. However, the Turkish community is, of course, our biggest strength. It's a very closely knit community, and that makes it, of course, much more efficient to address them with a well-planned proposition. Another factor is that they travel to Turkey and they spend approximately a month in Turkey every year. That's why the brand is still very strong among the community. And they are very associated with their relatives living both in Turkey and in other countries in Germany. So the international calls is a very important part of the business model. Of course, we had our own challenges. I think the biggest challenge is to adapt the MNO culture to becoming an MVNO.
So that's internal challenge you had.
It's an internal challenge.
Because I'd like to also to move the discussion as well, as you both new in this business, what were the challenges you had in Europe versus the challenge you had in the region, Amman, obviously, right? And whether these challenges are comparable, or you're talking of a completely different set of parameters to make it successful. And what are the key success factors then as well? So eventually you can elaborate on that, building on what you started with.
The challenge we faced in the market.
Yeah, to get a deal at all, right? To get a deal with the operators, also what are the conditions for success, etc. So I understand that for you as an MNO, you had to adapt internally your culture, and that is obviously an internal challenge.
Sure.
So did you have other challenges internally? And then we should talk about the external factors to be successful.
Yes, I mean, the biggest internal challenge was for us to try to fit into the MVNO business model, which requires a much more lean business model. It's a margin gain, whereas as MNOs, we inherit a more, we lay down the capex and then wait patiently until we're positive. And also, I think one of the major internal challenges was that, being used to controlling all the network platforms, all the technical platforms, versus having a more limited set of capabilities in an MVNO business model was also a bit different. Because, I mean, using the Turkcell brand, of course, brings us a lot of advantages, but it also comes with its heritage, where you have to make the offering in Germany as a MVNO carry the same brand attributes, carry the same level of customer experience.
Which you don't have necessarily under control.
Exactly. So that was one of the things that still, of course, keeps us quite busy. So those were the major internal challenges.
I think that's a very important point you just mentioned. Typically, an MVNO starts with a completely new value proposition that is actually known eventually from another business, right? Postal service, you name that. Distribution, Tesco, etc. But now the challenge you may have internally is obviously to port, to expand basically this value proposition without hurting your core business and your core value proposition. Exactly. and brand perception. So that brings immediately to the next challenge, which is actually external, which is the market itself. Mm-hmm. How did you manage to find the right partner to fit? Obviously, so the fit must be much more important, much more critical to transport and convey this value proposition in the market.
In terms of the net host operator, being an MNO, we understood each other, so that was very cooperative.
Can you share with whom you did the deal?
Yes, of course. Our host operator is Deutsche Telekom, T-Mobile, and they were also very strategically motivated.
So incumbent as you, actually.
They were very strategically motivated for this, so that hasn't been, one of the difficulty areas. That has been very collaborative. The market, in terms of the sales channels, also welcomed us. That was one of the areas where, of course, the Turkcell brand and strength has made it not so difficult. However, of course, choosing the right partners, that I think establishing the sales channel is a big challenge. It's one of the key success factors, of course. The customer care has been very important for us in order for the brand values to be consistent with the...
Was the customer care in Turkey or actually forwarding
which is delivered towards our subscribers in Germany.
Mm-hmm. I see. So it's not a local call center. So it's an interesting concept as well, that you launch a service on an incumbent infrastructure and use your customer service at home.
We use the one back in Turkey. It's a bilingual customer service.
Which is quite exceptional as well from a setup. Let's move on to Oman and understand what were the challenges for you, where you're coming from, and eventually for the audience. I think it's interesting for them to know that you're the CEO of Rena Mobile, which is the newly launched MVNO.
Yes.
And eventually share with us why did you think that Oman is the right place to launch an MVNO, and what were your basically challenges externally and obviously internally as well? You had to fund it, right?
Yes. I would say for us being the CEO of Rena Mobile, I think we have certain differences if we take from the Friendly Group, which had a very clear pan-regional approach, as Mikkel said. And also I think they were backed by funders who had a clear idea that this is something that they would back, even though it might take longer time than they initially expected. Rena was actually funded by 3 local shareholders, not telecom background, seeing this as an opportunity that there was an opening for 6 licenses, I think, from the beginning in the landscape of Oman. I think at the end, 5 of those licenses were actually formed into companies that went to market, and today I would say there's only 2 operating, which is Rena Mobile and Friendly Mobile. Our biggest challenge has been, of course, that people come in with expectations into an investment like this. And we have had to move very, very strongly to manage on our own cash generated by the customers. And of course, I'm very happy to announce that we managed to do that 2 years from operations. And that is also has an impact on how you build your business plan. I mean, you cannot build a business plan on growing quickly. You need to build your business plan on managing, as you say, the MVNO model to more or less run on fumes. I'm really pleased to see that you can always do more than you think. But the challenge is, apart from that, is also to manage the, I would say, the wholesale department in the MNO, because the MNO, of course, this is new also for them, and the wholesale department needs to be adopting to the idea of what this means. Initially, of course, there is a reluctance, as Mikkel said, and I think Friendly has done a great job across the region to really educate also these MNOs. We have tried to do our part in terms of Oman and the MNO in Oman. And I think that as any relationship, you start off with a little bit of friction, but once you get into that friction, you actually realize that as long as both are benefiting from it, it actually makes a lot of sense, and the support increases. So I think if you take Oman Mobile, which is Friendly and Renna MNO, they have, after losing 15 consecutive quarters, losing market share, they have for the last, I think, 5 or 6 quarters maintained their market position and are getting close to getting to 60%, including the Renna and Friendly. So I mean, we have a completely different model, I would say, than Friendly, but I'm really pleased to work with this model as well, because it works well for this region. It will take some time, I think, for MNOs to really adapt the idea. And of course, I think also MNOs, we're discussing with other MNOs in the region, it is still a matter of building up the strategy for the wholesale department, who normally operates with selling transmission, selling interconnection and so forth, to getting into something that is getting close to retail. And here I think our role would be more to say, don't worry about the retail part, keep it as a pure wholesale part, and let us manage the marketing side of it. The more you try to be governed by the wholesale department, where to focus, where to target, I think the higher the likelihood that the whole project for both parties will not succeed. We could see, for instance, Navras, they had a different approach where they required less investments in terms of BSS and OSS elements for the MNOs. Also less flexibility and lower margins and less ability to act in the market. And I think it's been very clear that it's a model that's not working properly.
That leads actually to my first question I had to you, which is selecting the operator, so the host operator. Yeah. So one of the barriers you saw with Navras was the lack of capability to host you. Is that what you're saying? That was one of the reasons why you went with Omantel?
Of course, there are several reasons. One of the reasons were, of course, that we saw, I think, as Friendly, that we rather take on certain of the elements on IT on ourselves. Mm-hmm. It gives us more liberation in terms of how you can do promotions, which is it is a very much a promotion-driven market. Mm-hmm. It gives you much more flexibility in terms of timing. You only then need to deal with the regulator for promotional support and so forth. And I think in general it also gives you an argument to actually have a little bit of a margin to play with, and as you grow, that margin will then hopefully come all the way down to the P&L. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Michael, eventually a question for you. What do you bring as you're expanding your business model? What do you bring on the table? Like, what's the strongest USP you bring to the table?
No, I think just to support what Asa just said about the Turkish community in Germany, I think that's a perfect example of a relatively well-defined segment that you can serve with a tailor-made proposition that is on in distribution, in customer care, in pricing, in all elements of the offer. You tailor-make to your target segment, and that's the whole idea with a more focused, more nimble player like an MVNO typically will be. In terms of what we have done, we have our flagship brand, which is called Friendly Mobile, which is targeted at the community and the people that, as we say, have a piece of their heart abroad, so and have an international element, typically an expatriate or a local with a significant part of their family or friends abroad. So we have, to this segment, built both on the product side, on the pricing side, have a lot of specific tailored solutions. For the customer care, for example, we provide customer care in 6 languages. All customer touch points are in multiple languages to cater to this international community. So in our case, with the Friendly Mobile brand, it is around the international cross-border customer, and all elements of the proposition is tailored to that, and for us that has been successful. In Oman, where we've now been active a bit more than 2 years, we have around 6% market share overall, and around 300,000 customers in Oman. So we consider that a fairly good success. Also, when you look at a global level, that is quite decent compared to benchmarks from overseas.
And you selected also Omantel?
Yes, we are also with Omantel. I think to support and elaborate a bit on what Jochen said, the management in Omantel, I think, deserve credit for taking this opportunity. I think we can say without insulting anyone that Navras took a little bit more the wait and see, or maybe even the, shall we say, slightly, wait a long time and see approach to this, whereas Omantel with Dr. Ahmad, the CEO, and his team, they said, okay, this is an opportunity. Let's do some deals and let's get launched. So instead of sitting on the fence, they actually managed to launch the first MVNO in the region, which was us, and I think Rena a few weeks later, while Navras was still deliberating internally. And I think if there is one lesson learned from the Oman experience, I think it is for the operator to look at this as any other business opportunity. If MVNOs come to the market, they have a valid proposition. Try and do a deal, try and get the best out of it, because experience from pretty much every single market in the world, and particularly also Oman for this region, is to take a proactive approach. Look at your network market share. Don't focus too stringently on your brand market share. And I think that's what has served Omantel very well, and I think they deserve credit for that.
I think a very strong message for the audience as well, for the operator who are sitting here and eventually thinking they can build fences. This will not hold for a long time, because you can expect that you will have multiple brands on the market, and the question is it better for you to host them or to fight them? This is a very good example of one market that is already facing, from the MNO perspective, who did not believe into this story, facing 2 additional competitors, actually. Any question? Because we'd like to finish in 5 minutes here. I'd like to catch up. The session will be only half an hour instead of 45 minutes planned. I hope you understand.
That's fine.
My ambition was to bring across the key messages, I think, which are already out, not necessarily going through the 15 questions we have in the program. Eventually, we have another question you'd like to pose. Else, I will go through the closing sessions, statements. So please, yes, wait until the, excuse me, can we have the, thank you. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Robert Berg. Now, one question there is, this usual question about price cannibalism or market segmentation. How has been the experience from Oman in that sense? Has it increased the market share for Omantel in that sense, or how has that been experienced, this MVNO?
No, I think we can say, and please jump in here,
short answer,
Joachim. But I think we can say that this has been a success for Omantel to host Rena and Friendly on the network, both in terms of revenue and in terms of network market share. So the price level has on certain destinations has been some pressure, but that has actually not been MVNO-led. This has been just as much, shall we say, a natural development from the operators. So I think we can say that the price level has remained fairly stable, and I think for the operator Omantel that made the right choice in terms of partnering instead of sitting on the fence, this has been a good financial as well as market share outcome.
Could I just add on to that? I mean, in terms of the pricing in general, you can say that it's been a more creative pricing setup. You have found, even though I heard Mr. Hamdi saying no bundles in terms of data, but bundling in terms of pricing for voice, bundling in terms of messaging packages, etc. I think overall generating more minutes into the network, more messages into the network that they usually had before, and that they couldn't cater themselves with their and maintaining their EBITDA margins. So I think that was a good use for them to use the MVNOs to actually push that sort of price development in the market.
Any other question? That's the last question I'll take.
Agne from Etisalat. I just wanted to ask from regulatory perspectives. As far as I'm aware, in Oman, MVNO access was actually obligatory from the TRA side. So MNOs were obliged to give access to the network to MVNOs, and the licenses were issued, reselling licenses were issued, and MNOs had an obligation. So I just wanted to ask you, what is your opinion on obliged MVNOs, sort of a regulated MVNOs, versus the commercially agreed MVNOs, because there are different approaches from regulatory perspectives. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the good question.
Yeah. There's actually an interesting story. You're absolutely right that there was from the Oman regulator a mandatory access introduced, but what's interesting is that was actually not done initially. The first few deals done from both Rena and Friendly were actually done in the early days when it was for commercial negotiations. At the time, again, without insulting anyone, I think we can say that Nawaz was a little bit on the fence, and therefore and effectively offered terms to the potential MVNOs that weren't attractive for their business cases. Therefore, the regulator stepped in and then made access mandatory. So again, you know, it's actually a very relevant point you're bringing up, because again, it highlights the importance of the operator in a given market being open to offering deals. In this case, one wasn't, and the regulator then had to step in. We are of the belief that commercial negotiations is the way to go. We don't favor mandatory access, but it obviously requires the operators to engage and to offer deals that make sense for both parties. It could have been avoided, the mandatory access in Oman, if both operators that had a, shall we say, slightly more rounded view on this. I think we can say that as I mentioned in the beginning, views are definitely maturing across the region with operators, and we foresee that negotiated deals will be the order of the day rather than mandatory access, and that's certainly the trend we are seeing in other markets.
If you look at the expertise and the experience you have in Europe, you have many MVNOs who changed host multiple times. So this is not a contract signed with blood and carved in stone. It's a free market. So eventually both gentlemen next year or the year after, depending on the contract they have, will be hosted by Nawaz. You never know. We'll see how this will evolve. I've seen that in the past, so I would not be surprised.
I will maybe challenge that slightly because, yes, in theory you're right, but if you look at also with our experience in this space back in Europe, it is actually quite rare that you see these shifts. Of course it happens, but there are a number of practical customer SIM card swaps, etc., which make it make it very. So if you don't mind, that is a little bit of a myth. I would like to kind of shoot down that you know, if you do a deal with an MVNO, I mean, then the next month they'll be shopping with somebody else, right? So I think you're right in theory, but
no, I'm right in practice.
In this region, I think it is going to be.
I'm not talking about changing every month.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about after 2 years or 3 years, it happened that operator changed host. It is a fact.
Yeah.
I can list you multiple players who have done that. But the ambition is not to make every month another host because it has a major event. Last, eventually, quick statements from you both. MVNO 2.0, what's the next step? Is it linked to data? Is it linked to something else? Expansion?
Yeah.
How do you see it?
I think Mr. Hamdi took up a very interesting thing, which was the use of data. I mean, even though if you look on Rana Mobile, who is then supposed to cater for the cost-conscious Omanis and young adults, students, you realize that even for that customer group, data is such an important product to have, good quality data. Even the point of differentiation, it doesn't matter. It's a perception game at the end. So even though you have poor capacity in the network, they still need a 7.2 megabit per second modem, even though it's useless. So having said that, I think you're coming into a situation.
Okay.
In our Turkcell Europe offering in Germany, as I said, because we had to convey the same brand values as our customers are used to in Turkey, we already have data bundles. We already have streaming music video. We have this Goals in Your Pocket service with the Turkish Football League. And so we had to deliver more or less similar offering as we do in Turkey. For us, the next step is really to expand into other markets where there's a sizable Turkish community and increase our capabilities in terms of flexibility.
Now that you have experience, what about hosting MVNOs yourself?
It's been a very big learning experience for Turkcell as well.
Thank you very much. Please thank the panelists.